Morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. Chamisa gave a speech at a funeral, and it has been circulating on the social media. I think we need to stop this habit of abusing religion and the name of God. I do not pretend to be a religious man or a man of cloth. But I think when you start using the Bible for the sake of deceiving people, that cannot be allowed in any society. We have got here a situation where this situation has been going on and is becoming absurd. This is what Chamisa was saying at this funeral. The country's leadership is chosen by God, not the country, but God. It bothers me. It really bothers me. Because what is it exactly he's trying to say there? And I think as a people, we need to get this clarified once and once for all. Or else we'll forever be going round and round in circles. I'll just play the.
Mwari ndiye unogadza vatungamiriri. Vatungamiriri havagadzwi nenyika. Vanogadzwa nani? Baba vakamupira. Thank you for unifying us. Napanapa hapana kana zvebato. Ina hangu handina bato, munoziva ndakasiya zvematongerwo enyika. Hapana zvechibhakira, hapana zvechimunwe. Panongova nenyaya yekuti vana vanyamunhu because we are one people. Mwari ndiye unogadza vatungamiriri.
Mwari ndiye anogadza vatungamiriri. God, the country's leadership, is chosen by God. So what are we saying here? We just had an election last year. And for most of us ordinary mortals, we believe that those elections were not free, fair, and credible. Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. Are we saying then that Zanu PF actually did not rig the elections? God elected Mnangagwa. That is what it means here. Let me clarify that point. The people of Zimbabwe, ever since the late 1990s, they realized that Zanu PF was rigging elections. And they came to a consensus that to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, we need to elect opposition leaders who will focus on implementing democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. That point cannot be overemphasized. So after 24 years now of the opposition, MDC, then later on they became Triple C, being on the political stage, initially led by Morgan Tsvangirai, and then Chamisa took over. They have failed to implement even one token democratic reform. And that is the reason why Zanu PF was able to blatantly rig last year's elections. It's not as if Chamisa does not know this. He knows it. He knows that this has been happening. This is a quotation from his colleague Tendai Biti in 2015, arguing his fellow opposition members that they cannot keep on participating in these flawed elections. And he was saying this after the GNU. This was in 2015. During the GNU itself, the primary purpose of the GNU of 2008 to 2013 was that the opposition should implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the election. They failed to implement even one reform, and they participated in 2013, and Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. And this is Tendai Biti now saying we cannot keep on participating in these flawed elections. And he wasn't the only one. Here is a quotation from David Coulthard saying the same thing. The 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. Why didn't he withdraw? He explains why. There was mistrust between the MDCT, one group, and MDCN. They did not trust each other to withdraw at the same time. So they participated because they each feared that if they withdraw, the other one will participate and win the few gravy train seats that Zanu PF was offering as bait. And he also clearly states there in that statement, participating gave the process credibility. And in giving Zanu PF the process credibility, you're also giving Zanu PF legitimacy. So here, that is a clear statement. We have got a situation here where the opposition is participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed. That Zanu PF will rig them. But they go ahead and participate out of greed. What is more, they've been conning people to participate, to assure their supporters and the Zimbabwe public. They blatantly lied that they are going to win rigged elections. In 2018, when they were going into those elections without reforms, people said, why are you going back in the elections without reforms? And Chamisa himself said, no, MDC Alliance, we have stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Of course, he was lying. And last year, he repeated the same lie. He told the people, I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And he doesn't even have the honesty to admit to people that he was lying. Now he's telling us that it's God who elect these people. Is he saying that God was involved in the rigging of the elections? Or it was part of God's plan that Zanu PF should rig the elections? Or are we to say that Zanu PF didn't even rig the elections? Because if it was God, God would not want to be involved in rigged elections. This is a clear-cut case of an individual who is lying. He repeatedly said God is in it. Hashtag God is in it. God was in what? In the plan to let Zanu PF rig the elections? That is a blatant lie. And he's also lying here that God was somehow involved in the election of Mnangagwa. And no doubt before him, Mugabe. We have had 44 years of rigged elections in Zimbabwe. And now we are being told that God was in it. God was involved in all these rigged elections. I think we need to put an end to this madness. We cannot evoke the name of God over an issue that is a clear-cut case that this is somebody lying here. And we want to keep on pretending that somehow God is involved in it. This is ridiculous. Chamisa and company are preparing for the 2028 elections. No doubt he will come up with another claim of how he is going to win those elections and how he has come up with strategies of stopping Zanu PF rigging those elections or winning rigged elections. And the millions of ordinary Zimbabweans desperate for change would believe him, participate in those flawed elections, and by participating, gives Zanu PF legitimacy. And we are back to where we are today. This circus must stop. We really have got to stand up now and say, no, this must stop. Nelson Chamisa and company, the people have risked life and limb to elect them for the one primary purpose that they would implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. After 24 years, 5 of which in the GNU, they failed to implement even one reform. They've been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that doing so will give the process credibility and Zanu PF legitimacy. And he has got the audacity of telling us that God is in those harebrained schemes. I think the people of Zimbabwe must wake up. You cannot be that gullible that you believe something that you can see, but this has got nothing to do with God. Like I said, I'm not pretending to be a religious person, nor am I a man of cloth. But the God I was brought up to believe in has nothing to do with these rigged elections. These claims by Chamisa that God is in it, God is not in any of these rigged elections. If God was in it, Zanu PF would not be rigging elections. Why would God be in a process that men can do for ourselves? The task of implementing reforms is something that men with the political will would have done. Zanu PF, Robert Mugabe, in 2008, when they he signed the global political agreement that gave birth to the GNU. Robert Mugabe's plan was very simple. Give Morgan Tsvangirai, Tendai Biti, Nelson Chamisa, and the rest of the MDC leadership the trappings of power. The ministerial limousines, the very generous salaries and allowances. And for Morgan Tsvangirai himself, the $4 million US mansion in Highlands. And the MDC leaders forgot all about the reforms. That is the political reality. They completely forgot about the reforms. Zanu PF cronies even boasted about it during the GNU. You ask them, why are MDC leaders not implementing reforms? And they would boast. MDC they are learning, they've learned to enjoy the benefits of the gravy train seats. They will never rock the boat. They will never implement the reforms. And of course, they were right. SADC leaders, credit where credit is due. SADC leaders, notably Minister Lindiwe Sulu, did her best to remind the MDC leaders to implement the reforms during the GNU. They did not. Is Chamisa going to tell us God was in that too? It is naive. It is unbelievable that some people would still want to believe that MDC leaders did not sell out during the GNU, preferring to believe these lies about God is in it, quoting verses at every turn. There's nothing wrong with being religious. But let's not abuse the name of God. Let's not blame God in matters that he had nothing to do with. God was never involved in the decision not to implement even one token reform during the GNU. God was never involved in the decision by Chamisa and company to participate in flawed elections out of greed. Why does he want to evoke the name of God in things that are ungodly? God does not take pleasure in the fact that Zimbabwe is a failed state where half the population is living in abject poverty. The country's infrastructure has all but collapsed. How many millions of Zimbabweans out there, even in the urban centers today, do not even have running water? The economy is in such a mess that over 80% of the population are unemployed, relying on informal sector. The one thing you can say about the informal sector is it only works when you have got customers who have got a formal job. Very few who are in the informal sector themselves buy from other people in the informal sector. That's why most of these people are living from hand to mouth. And in the chaos of the of the currency losing its value, it's a nightmare there. Earlier on today, I was watching a video of the queue, people queuing at the bank. The regime said we're going to have new currency, but they're putting in restrictions on how much you can get on a daily basis. So you get a little salary, and then you've got to spend a whole week queuing every day to withdraw it. It's another job. So another full-time occupation. Spending 2, 3, even more hours a day queuing at the bank. And when it gets your turn, you're allowed to withdraw a limit, 100 SEK. And tomorrow you've got to come back into town again. It's a nightmare. It's all unproductive work, that. But what else can you do? Zimbabwe is a failed state. And the main reason for it is that for the last 44 years now, counting, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped Zanu PF rigging the elections. Nelson Chamisa and company were elected by the people of Zimbabwe for the primary purpose of implementing those democratic reforms. That is the fact. Why did they fail to implement even one reform, even when they had the golden chance to do so during the GNU? It's because they are corrupt. It's because they are incompetent. Why have they been participating in flawed elections? To give Zanu PF legitimacy. Same reason. Because they are corrupt. They are incompetent. And for people like Chamisa to try to keep on hiding behind biblical verses and claiming that God is in whatever he's doing, it's got to be denounced here and now, and loudly too. God is not in any of your harebrained schemes. So leave God out of it. Zanu PF has been rigging elections. And to claim that God was choosing these leaders is an outrage. The people of Zimbabwe have been denied their democratic right to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country because Zanu PF has been rigging elections. And Chamisa and company have been elected these last 24 years to implement the reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. They failed to do so, and they cannot keep on hiding behind this false claim that God is in it. God is in what? Your failure to implement reforms? Your betraying of the people? This has got to stop. Let's leave God out of it. You should address your own political incompetence honestly and not pretend that it is not your failure, but God's failure. God has never been in any of your schemes. And that is the truth. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night. Thank you.